Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I am Ayya Soma, and I'm here with Ayya Vimalanyani. Venerable is spending the Vasa here at Empty Cloud Monastery. So tonight, I know you were all waiting to see Ajahn Punadhammo, but there has been a last-minute issue. So the talk on dependent origination will have to wait until next week. And this evening, we'll just have more of an improv Dhamma discussion between the two bhikkhunis here. But we'll start with a bit of meditation. So Venerable Vimalanyani has agreed to guide us in meditation. And yeah, we can start and then have a bit of discussion later. Thank you, Venerable.
Yes, so hello everyone. Nice to see that a few people are joining in, even though we are on a new stream. And I hope more people will join in as they see that the live stream is here. We will begin with the Namo Tassa as usual. Feel free to join in if you like. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So, welcome to everyone who has joined in. I see a few people are typing in the live chat. Nice to see you all. We will start with meditation, and we've just been spending a few very quiet days at the monastery, so we're all in a very quiet mood. So I think for today, we will just do a samatha type meditation, and I will guide you into the meditation a little bit, and then we'll do a quiet meditation for a few minutes. So there won't be too much guidance tonight. So sit in a comfortable position. Make sure you find a position that you don't have to change for the next 20 to 30 minutes, where you're comfortable, relaxed, but still alert. Focus your attention inwards on your breath or on your body, whatever is easier for you to feel. Just take a few moments to arrive in this present moment. Let go of all the thoughts that might be going through your mind. Let go of all that has happened today. Let go of all the plans for the future. Just focus on your breathing or on your body. Relax your body and your mind. Make sure there's no tension in your face, your forehead, your jaws, your shoulders, your heart area, or anywhere else in your body. Just let go of everything that's painful in your body, any tension, and let go of anything that might be painful in your mind. If your mind has wandered away, come back to your breathing or come back to your body. Maybe you can feel that your breathing is starting to settle down, or that your body is starting to feel a little bit more comfortable and relaxed. Let your mind sink deeper and deeper into the stillness, into the peace. So we are slowly coming to the end of today's meditation. Move your attention to the center of your chest, to your heart area. We've just done meditation, and that is a very meritorious activity. So we are going to share the merits of our practice with all beings, and we mentally invite them to rejoice in this practice and in the Buddha's teaching. May all beings share these merits. May all beings generate joy, happiness, peace in their own hearts. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings attain Nibbana. And then, when you've shared the merits, and when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes and come back to the external world.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Venerable, for leading us in meditation practice. And good to see you, a lot of friends, and some are a little concerned for you. Shadow label, what happened to your wrists?
I have tendonitis, very persistent tendonitis. So I'm on medication, but it seems that it takes a long time to heal.
Yes, we're working on Venerable's health, so hopefully it will improve soon. And good to see you, Ginny, Visaka, Patricia, Melissa, Nishanta, Kumu, and Sam. Nishanta and Kumu, aren't you the same person? Or you're playing, using your magic tricks and multiplying. All right, so tonight's session is a little bit improvised because, as mentioned, it was supposed to be Ajahn Punnalamo giving a talk. So we thought last minute, literally like 1 minute before starting, to discuss about this Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 3.132. I'll put the link in the live chat. Welcome also to Scott Bartel, who says, hello, metta to you both, metta to you as well. So what we can do is read the sutta, and then it's pretty short, and then we can have a bit of a discussion. And you're welcome at any time to put your comments in the live chat and have a discussion with us as well. Kyle, you're also welcome to do as much. So maybe I can invite Venerable to read if you like.
Sure. So the sutta goes as follows. Mendicants, these 3 people are found in the world. What 3? A person like a line drawn in stone, a person like a line drawn in sand, and a person like a line drawn in water. And who is the person like a line drawn in stone? It's a person who is often angry, and their anger lingers for a long time. It's like a line drawn in stone, which isn't quickly worn away by wind and water, but lasts for a long time. In the same way, this person is often angry, and their anger lingers for a long time. This is called a person like a line drawn in stone. And who is the person like a line drawn in sand? It's a person who is often angry, but their anger doesn't linger long. It's like a line drawn in sand, which is quickly worn away by wind and water and doesn't last long. In the same way, this person is often angry, but their anger doesn't linger long. This is called a person like a line drawn in sand. And who is the person like a line drawn in water? It's a person who, though spoken to by someone in a rough, harsh, and disagreeable manner, still stays in touch, interacts with, and greets them. It's like a line drawn in water, which vanishes right away and doesn't last long. In the same way, this person, though spoken to by someone in a rough, harsh, and disagreeable manner, still stays in touch, interacts with, and greets them. This is called a person like a line drawn in water. These are the three people found in the world.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Well, the first question is, which person are we? So it's very interesting. Very beautiful sutta, actually, and very good. The Buddha has such a master of metaphors and using really the right words to describe the states of mind. I feel we can see in ourselves who perhaps we've been all three actually in the past. Perhaps we're mostly one of the three these days. Hopefully more towards the last one than the first one. More like water rather than stone. But realistically, probably a little bit like sand. But yeah, it's interesting how he describes it really so purely, and also how we've probably met people who were both etched in stone, drawn in sand, and drawn in water, and how we are relating to them.
Yeah, I feel like it also depends on the defilements. Like there can be a certain defilement that is for us as though it was etched in stone. And another defilement might be like something that's drawn in water or something that is actually drawn in sand. So I think it depends from person to person, but it also depends from defilement to defilement. And sometimes it also just depends on our like daily mood. Like some day one thing happens and we really get upset, and another day the same thing happens, but because we're in a better mood, we just quickly let it go. So yeah, I feel it can really vary from day to day depending on whether we are in a good mental space or I am smiling.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely a lot of truth to that, but also there are some flashbacks. I remember in the past interacting with different people and perhaps having strong interaction of like going, well, this is not agreeable, this is pretty bad, and then, well, actually my mind tends to forget unless it's something really intense and that is difficult to forget. But then I remember having over the course of my life interactions with people who would remember, and I had completely forgotten what even was the subject of the quarrel, but they had a strong memory of it, like it had happened like a minute ago rather than a year ago or 5 years ago or whatever it is. So it's very interesting to see that what is the consequence. I guess we're talking a lot about dependent origination this past month, and so everything is dependently arisen. So what are the conditions? I think it's very interesting to really search of what are the conditions that create as a result a mind that is drawn in stone, or how is it that what are the conditions that create instead of a result that is more sandy-like, or once again, ideally with water. And it's interesting reflection to see. So I feel like, once again, due to our ignorance of dependent origination, and not in terms of the scholastic way of remembering every single link, but rather the ignorance of experientially understanding causality, then we it's always this experience of hit or miss. So sometimes we put the right conditions in place and we have, oh, well, very pleasant mind to be with that forgets things. And then some other times, then we miss, don't hit. And then we have these really awful conditions that are the cause of suffering for ourselves first and foremost, and for others. Also experientially, then having to deal with my own mind of obsessing about stuff. Remember, especially during meditation retreats, the hatred of like random people would come in my mind because there's anything to do. Perhaps you're also in really pleasant conditions, right? In the middle of nowhere in the forest. Sometimes there's actually, the food can be great. I remember when I went to Bhavana Society, every day we had this lovely Sri Lankan food. So everything was good. There was nothing to hate. And my mind was trying to find something really to hate. So it goes and digs into the past. And then you start, that person was really, and before I left, they said X, Y, and Z things. And you start,
just perpetuating old habit patterns. Like if you have the habit to hate stuff and there's nothing to hate, then you have to dig up stuff from the past just so you can continue your habit. So that's one thing. And one thing I was also thinking about is that it really depends on how strongly, whatever the external trigger is in that moment, how strongly our ego feels threatened by what's happening. Like if that's something that we don't strongly identify with, maybe somebody is insulting us, but we don't really care about that person, or no other important person is listening to what's happening, or they're criticizing a character trait that we don't really feel is very strong, like that we don't identify with strongly, we can let it go very easily. But if it's something that's very important to us, or that we think is really like a core trait of ourselves, then it's like a line drawn in stone, and you have this massive reaction trying to protect that ego that's coming up there. So obviously that's all delusion, and obviously that's all ultimately not like a permanent self. But the illusion of the self is really there because it has all these self-defense mechanisms, and because it has all these emotions available. So it stirs up the mind, so the mind can't actually see that there's all the delusion there. So it's actually a self-defense mechanism of the ego to be able to stir up all these emotions and to be able to etch these lines into stone, so that we are not actually getting a clear mind and able to see what's going on deep inside. So I feel this is a very powerful mechanism of the mind to actually keep us in samsara and to keep us being deluded.
Comes to mind is from what you're saying is, as it says, line drawn in sand, and then as the wind removes the sand, then you actually find the stone, what is etched in stone. So it's sort of layers and layers of mind. But also very interesting how it seems to be a decrease in this sutta. So there is the often angry, hence the metaphor of the line drawn in stone. And their anger lingers for a long time. So often angry, and the anger is there for a long time, and it's in stone. Then often angry, but the anger doesn't linger long, and hence it's like the sand. And then actually in the third part, there is no anger anymore, but rather there is patience. So fundamentally the endurance. So it reminds me of the teachings of the Buddha in the Sabbasava Sutta of the taints to be overcome through endurance. So whether it's obviously cold or heat, but then also ill-spoken words, harsh words, disagreeable words, as it stays here. And it's so there seems to be the endurance because you're not actually going to it by aversion. So out of like, I don't like this, I don't want this, has to stop, which actually, as we see from the two examples before, instead it stays, even has to stop, but actually we create the conditions for it to stay longer and longer. But here instead, through endurance, so the third one seems more like a solution rather than, kind of a scenario in a way. By endurance, then actually you can still stay in touch and interact with and greet them. And because it vanishes away, we don't hold on to it. Actually, as Venerable was mentioning, the ego, I guess, is not wrapped up with it. We don't think, okay, this person is, saying all these crazy things to me, or that, there is something about me that is wrong, or something about me that needs to be corrected, or whatever it is, or this person has it, has everything against me, but rather we understand how it's impersonal. How this, if someone is saying harsh words at us, well, actually, most likely we have nothing to do with it, Especially being a female monastic, there can be a lot of these situations where people can, sometimes, well, most of the time they actually say nice things, but sometimes, which is like kind of how tricky the mind is. You always remember the 3 bad things that were said in a year and not the million other good things.
The 2 bad bricks in the wall. Yes.
Yeah. Those really make an impression. They're etched in stone. All the good things, like water. But yeah, like it can, when they are, those things can, those unhappy circumstances, we can get them so personal, and we can start thinking there's something wrong with me. But when we actually see how instead they are dependently arisen, then it stings less and less until it doesn't stink anymore, because we understand that it's just product of different, obviously, perhaps defilements of the person, and cultural conditioning, and lots of different elements that have nothing to do whatsoever with us. They have nothing to do with, what we did, what we are. Like, they're impersonal, but we tend to make the impersonal personal, start grasping onto it, and create so much suffering for ourselves, when it's just words. Like, it's incredible the power that words can have in the mind.
Yes. Yeah, this last person, the third person, also reminds me very much, similar to what you just said, of the one sutta where the angry Brahmin comes to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, "I don't accept your gift." So yeah, that's for people at home who maybe don't know. There's an angry Brahmin, and he's very angry because many other Brahmins of his family have converted to Buddhism and became monks and nuns. And so he's very upset because they're no longer following the Brahmin rituals, and he comes to the Buddha and he wants to attack the Buddha. I don't remember if he actually wants to kill him or just be very angry. And so the Buddha remains completely calm, obviously, as the Brahmin comes and abuses him. And since the Buddha doesn't react and doesn't, participate in the conflict, eventually the Brahmin calms down enough so that the Buddha actually gets a word in. And so the Buddha kind of distracts him with a question. And the Buddha says, "Well, Brahmin, do people sometimes visit your house?" And the Brahmin says, "Yeah, of course, I'm an important person. People come and visit." And so the Buddha asks him if then he offers them some food or drink or some other kind of gift. And the Brahmin says, "Yeah, of course, that's hospitality. Of course, I do that." And then the Buddha says, "What happens if they don't accept your hospitality, if they don't partake of your food and drink?" And the Brahmin says, "Well, then I just keep it." And so the Buddha says, "Well, I'm informing you, I don't partake of your anger. You can just keep it." And then the Brahmin kind of has a small breakthrough in understanding, and he's quite impressed that the Buddha is able to not partake of the angry emotions of another person. And then he asks for a teaching, and he's actually converted to Buddhism himself in the end. So that little sutta reminds me very much of what we were just talking about here, that, there's a person who, even when spoken to very harshly, still remains entirely calm and is able to interact with the other person and greet them and just have a skillful relationship with them. And if they're really good at it, they, like the Buddha, then they're even able to teach them Dhamma and to have a positive outcome in such an interaction that from the outside looks like it should be a very difficult, conflictive interaction.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's true. That's one of the biggest also differences, I think, as we start practicing, that we start noticing these moments of wisdom where we are capable of acting like the Buddha, more like the Buddha and less like our previous self, which on the other hand, it's kind of like it's always Christmas, so we accept all the gifts that are given to us. Even if they stink, we're like, we open it up and like, you know, put ourselves into it.
Yeah.
Like,
A gift. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so it reminds me also of what the Buddha says in terms of Vedana. You know, when we feel a pleasant feeling, we feel it attached, but also when we feel an unpleasant feeling, we feel it attached. And whether it's neutral feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, we also feel it attached. Everything feels attached, like it's sticky, it's there, like we are not capable of discerning what is wholesome and what is unwholesome sometimes, because everything sticks to us. But as we start training the mind, as we start practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, we start seeing how sometimes we obviously, you know, the defilements take the best, the best out of us. I don't know how you say it in English. But sometimes, you know, because of the habits that we have cultivated in the past, but sometimes we can be actually very skillful, and we can see that is, even though there is a nice wrapping perhaps in the gift, that actually the contents are harmful, and that we don't need to accept everything that has been given to us. And what really comes to mind is actually coming back also to being, you know, a female monastic. I remember there was a time when I went with actually Ayya Santusika in Union Square to an alms round, and at a certain point, this man approached us and he asked us questions to verify that we were Buddhist monastics, and he was really, really upset at a certain point to see that there were female monks. Usually, once again, we have a better reaction, but that one was the other side of the coin, and he started abusing us verbally. Luckily, not physically, and started yelling, fake monks in the middle of Union Square. And, you know, usually I would have, like my former self would have, or sometimes also my current self, current defiled self, could feel either sorry for myself or, you know, just get quite aggressive, actually, quite angry, perhaps like the second or even the first one, and start yelling at the person and go, you know, well, I'm a fake monk. Well, you're a fake Buddhist. And start making more of a scene within the middle of New York City. But it was so interesting that in that moment, actually, I had none of these thoughts. So it wasn't actually an intellectual pondering, but rather my instinct was really like the Buddha, not to take the gift. But because in that moment I was able to see how it was dependently arisen in the man's mind. You know, I had never met him. I had no idea even what his name was. All I knew was that he was from a Buddhist country where he was taught that there were no female monastics and that they hadn't ever existed in that particular place where he was raised. So he didn't even know that the Buddha actually had created the order himself. So he was acting so unskillfully based on the love actually that he had for something that he knew was precious, like the Dhamma. So in that way, actually, for a second, I was able to relate to him. Because we had that one thing in common. We had nothing else in common except that love for the Dhamma, the love for the triple gem. And, well, actually, we had two things in common: the love of the triple gem and a defiled mind. So actually, I really was like, just like this person is full of greed, hatred, and delusion, so is my mind full of greed, hatred, and delusion. So many times have I done things unskillfully in the past, and probably I will in the future as well until I attain awakening. So all of this, it was literally like a 1 second sort of understanding, instinctual understanding. So there was no conditions for anger to even arise. The result was automatically compassion. Was, wow, we're trembling in samsara here together. Wow, it's a difficult place to be. And so, yeah, actually, similar to how this sutta says, I was able to deal in being spoken in a rough, harsh, and disagreeable manner. Yet I did not stay in touch or interacted with, or I did greet them, though. So it's also important to not take this too literally, and understand what is the appropriate response based in the current situation. So in that situation, actually, I think my response was appropriate, which was to wish for them to be happy, healthy, and peaceful, and to walk away. So not to continue interacting, because there was nothing really to say. There was no sort of reasoning, no kind of space for that to happen. But actually, by staying in that place, perhaps things would have escalated and other people would have interacted. So just leaving, sometimes, the best and most compassionate answer is just go on and do your thing. And not fuel the fire if someone has a fire going on. So yeah, just to clarify in the last point.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story, Ayya. And I think that also illustrates how important it is to like constantly practice Dhamma in a small way in our daily life, like every single day, just, to direct our mind towards Dhamma, reading a sutta, practicing a bit of meditation, cultivating a little bit of wisdom here and there. And sometimes it can feel like we're not making any progress. But then when we actually are put into a difficult situation, suddenly that wisdom kind of comes up and we don't really know where it comes from, but suddenly it's there. And that's because we have inclined our mind for a long time in the right direction. So I feel like this illustrates really how like every day, like small incremental changes eventually put us like come to a point where we actually can be put into difficult situations and where these kind of things and like where we are able to have a skillful reaction to that. And I actually remember a very similar situation, and that was back when I was a layperson, so quite a long time ago. And I had just come back from my very, very first retreat in Buddhism. So I was like a really, really newbie Buddhist. And my first retreat was in the Goenka tradition. And Goenka also teaches about that sutta with the angry Brahmin and not accepting the gift. And so I came back. It was my first day back at work in the office. And at that time, I had a very, very difficult boss. And he was a very, very angry person. And so I had just come back from the vacation, and he comes bursting into my office, and the door slams against the wall, and his face is red, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, and there's saliva flying everywhere. It was just disgusting, and he was just screaming at me for something that I had no control over, and I had been away for 10 days, so wasn't even aware of what had been going on. But for some reason, he thought that I was responsible for that, and he was going completely crazy. And then I heard this small voice in my head saying, don't accept the gift, don't accept the gift, because I had just come back from the retreat. So yeah, similar to Ayya, I think I was able to remain really calm and tell him, to really calm him down and say, yeah, I'm going to look into this. I will report back to you in half an hour. We will sort this out. It's not going to be a problem. So eventually he left my office really quietly, and I think he was quite embarrassed. But yeah, sometimes when you have like just at the right moment, these Dhamma teachings will pop up in your mind and help you to skillfully deal with a situation that might otherwise be quite difficult.
Yeah, and it's also remarkable to see how then actually we're much better, we're more skillful at dealing with the situation, and we feel so much better, as opposed to when we have a strong reaction. The first well, it's not even the first, the only person that actually is having a hard time is us, because that's the only person we hang out with the entire time. So whether the other person, is having a hard time or not, it's really indifferent, because we are the ones, we can't really experience their mind states. What we can experience is our mind state. And crying, for example, feeling very desperate and sorry that we've been abused, it's actually really an unpleasant feeling, an unpleasant state of mind. And then it blurs the mind even more. And perhaps then we are incapable of doing anything that is beneficial for hours, if not for days, because it's actually physically debilitating if we cry a lot. And similarly, righteous indignation. Woo. Yeah, very, very poisonous mind state. So it's very important to remember that when we actually relinquish anger and we make another choice, we are the ones benefiting first and foremost. Like, it's not, we tend to think, oh, I am not indulging in anger to be a good Buddhist and do something good for everybody else, which is true, so it's nice not to be around angry, crazy people. So that is definitely a good thing to do. But first and foremost, though, we're doing it for ourselves, actually. And that was one of the biggest lessons when I was able to practice the teachings of the Buddha fully. Whenever I'm very skillful. Sometimes, once again, I am not that skillful, but that was quite a successful situation where I was like, wow, this is how it feels like not to have suffering. It was incredible. It was a moment of actually strengthening of the faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, rather than the opposite, because sometimes those situations, especially when they're based on, sex or gender, there can be like, you're like, what am I doing in this path? But because I was practicing the Dhamma, then it actually strengthened my faith in the teachings of the Buddha and how transformative they are. And as Venerable was saying, we're constantly putting all these seeds in the soil and nourishing them. And, we have a lot of times where like, oh, why is there no seedling at least? Well, we just planted it. But then all of a sudden it sprouts. And it sprouts at the right time. And we are like, oh, this is actually a really nice plant, really good fruit, really comfortable, much better. So yeah, it's part of actually self-love, not to indulge in hatred.
Following on from what you just said, there's also a small teaching in the Goenka tradition that is very, very similar to this sutta that we've read today. And there, Goenka also explains like how the Dhamma works. And so he said how you deal with anger. And so he says in the beginning, when you're not really a practitioner, you're not very strong, then there's so much anger inside and it feels like a fire that is burning inside you. And whenever a trigger comes from the outside, all you can do is just add more fuel to the fire, and it just gets worse and worse, as you just mentioned. You feel physically debilitated and mentally exhausted, and you can't really do much with it. And so as you practice, then eventually when a trigger comes from the outside, there is fuel for your fire, but your mindfulness gets stronger and you can just observe calmly, so you don't add your own emotion on top. So when the fuel is used up, then the fire goes out. And eventually, if you're a really strong practitioner, then your mind is so strong that you can actually, the moment the trigger comes and the fire is ignited, you just pour a whole bucket of water on it. So you have like whatever countermeasures you have cultivated, understanding, wisdom, or metta or compassion for yourself or for the other person, whatever skillful mind states you have cultivated come in there, and they just, it's like a huge bucket of water that completely puts out that entire fire. And I think the metaphor is so beautiful also because of what you just mentioned. The fire is there, is so painful, is so burning, but the water is just so cooling and calming and peaceful. And it's such a beautiful metaphor for, the what happens when you can let go of the defilements, like the ease and the joy and the peace that you feel at that point, and the calmness. I think it's a very fitting metaphor. Also, it's a very beautifully chosen image there.
Yeah, no wonder why the Buddha actually always uses, or in Buddhism in general, there's always lots of metaphors relating to water, the purity of water, and also the coolness of water. Yeah. And we have a few comments here.
Okay.
Pial says, why do some people enjoy being angry in a wired way? Is there some sort of gratification in being angry? Yes, actually, the Buddha says that it's the honey tip with the poison root. And as hate type, I gotta say that it's true.
Yes, strong emotions are very enjoyable because then our mind is agitated and doesn't feel bored. So we like to cling to very strong emotions, whether that's positive or negative emotions, as long as we don't get bored. Whatever keeps us busy, that's what we find interesting. And that's what we cultivate. And that's why our defilements get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, definitely. In my culture, I'm from Italy. There is somewhat, I wouldn't say an encouragement, but kind of like it's okay to express emotions, which can be healthy, but they can also be unhealthy when it's actually, as Venerable was saying, when we start fueling the emotion. So one thing is to actually acknowledge what we're experiencing. So if we're experiencing anger, we also need to understand that it's a natural emotion. Now, natural does not mean wholesome. This is where we get very confused a lot of times in Buddhism. We're like, oh, well, it's natural. That's so great. Well, everything is natural, poison is, everything is
Suffering
natural.
is natural.
Suffering is natural, exactly. Genocide, rape, all of that is natural. So we are trying to do, actually, the Buddhist path is an unnatural path. It used to trigger me a lot at the very beginning of my path when I was starting to think in these ways, because we also tend to mythologize nature, especially if we live in urban centers. We think of nature being this idyllic place with bunnies and, hopping and,
butterflies,
yes.
rainbows, unicorns.
Yes, exactly. But then actually you go to the forest and
full of ticks and mosquitoes and snakes.
Yeah, and predators and prey, and it's actually a really harsh environment. It's actually remarkable that as humans we have such a privileged state of existence that apparently we taste bad, so nobody wants to eat us. But if you're a chicken, you definitely have a different experience of the world. We used to have some rescue chickens here, and every single being except for the herbivores like chicken. And they were terrified from above, like the hawks flying, from the ground, the foxes and the raccoons, and the humans, even the Buddhist humans coming and going like, that was a big chicken there. It's like, wow, what a really scared, they were always, like, what's going to happen to me? And actually, when things happened to some of their friends, they were going exactly through all the different emotions that we as humans go to as well whenever we're experiencing assault, whenever we're experiencing any type of trauma, of violence. So it's important to understand that it is natural, anger, but that it's something that we're trying to uproot, but that at the same time, we've created so many conditions for it to arise in the past. So it would be surreal to imagine that just because we want to, then it will disappear. Actually, that's another product of ignorance, of thinking that we own our anger, so we can decide whether for it to appear or disappear. But what we can do is actually create new conditions for it to not appear to begin with in the future. But right now, if we're experiencing anger, we've already done the work, the job in the past. So what we can do is not, as Venerable Vimalanyani was saying, throw, all our sticks and matches into the fire, but rather acknowledge it, understand it, and see it. So when we, as I was kind of, I wouldn't say raised. It's not my mom taught me how to overreact about things, but she didn't. It wasn't stigmatized as it can be, for example, in Anglo-Saxon cultures. Then yeah, it can actually become also a vehicle for a release, a very unhealthy vehicle for release. But sometimes the emotions pile up and they become so heavy and we attach to them, as we were saying. But then they become also they're delicious, but also they're burning us. So we want to get them out. And I think that's where the wired way, as you define it, or the gratification, like we throw it at someone else. It's completely unskillful. And actually, we're not really throwing it at anyone except for it's like a boomerang. We think we're throwing it, but then it, boom, it hits us back. But in that process, our inherent delusion convinces us that actually we are having a gratification by externalizing, and that we're also justified to do that. So we're right to be crazy, so to speak.
Let's move on to the next comment. I think there are quite a few.
Yeah, you guys are firing up, pun intended. Gita says, Ayya, when someone is yelling at you, can we also use compassion towards that person as they don't see clearly due to their ignorance, not react personally to this type of situation? Well, I think I spoke about that earlier. So if you want to maybe address it.
Yeah, I think Gita also posted this when I was talking about my boss coming in and being quite out of his mind. Yeah, sure, compassion for the other person, but when we react in this way, we are also protecting ourselves. So we're having compassion for the others, but we're also having compassion for us. We're basically having compassion for everybody who's there. So I think what I was describing is not to react personally to this type of situation, but just to take a step back. No, I don't have to engage with this kind of emotional overload that he's presenting to me. I can just try to calm him down. That will be beneficial for him because he's caught up in this internal fire of being completely out of his mind. And I also don't have to create that fire in myself, in my own mind. So I feel like this is compassion for both of us. At the same time, it's not just a sentimental feeling of compassion. It's also an approach that is based in wisdom. So Buddhism is a religion, obviously, or a teaching of wisdom and compassion. So wisely choosing a course of action. So if we actually have the presence of mind to take a step back from the situation, to not get emotionally caught up, then we can make a conscious choice how we want to react. So then we can actually implement the wisdom that we might have generated, hopefully, on our Buddhist path, and choose a course of action instead of getting so caught up by our defilements that we can't choose and we just get carried away by the anger that might arise in us or that might be triggered by the other person. So compassion, yeah, and compassion can also be strongly guided by wisdom, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the whole Mahayana path is grounded in compassion as a vehicle to develop wisdom. So absolutely. And Matt says, anger is also a form of fear, knowing that can also allow compassion and empathy versus meeting with one's own anger. Yeah, well, also fear is a form of aversion. So very much related to anger. It's a form of dosa, avoidance.
Yeah, and again, I think this is something when our ego feels threatened, it reacts with a strong fear. And because fear is not a pleasant emotion, we often cover it up with anger, because anger gives us a lot of energy and we can project it onto other people and we pretend that the other person is the problem. So we create a big emotional mess, and that way we can cover up that we're actually fearful and that we're super scared.
Mm-hmm. And Kumu says that is so true. Using snippets from the suttas in these situations helps a lot. Like the similes of the saw is also great in that aspect. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. And then once again, meditation. In meditation, when nothing really major happens, that's when we start becoming acquainted with the mind, with the workings of the mind. So that then we don't become we're not surprised also by our reactions in situations, right? Because usually we are surprised because we don't really know our mind. Even though we're constantly spending time with ourselves, we're always distracted with who knows what, scrolling, liking things on Facebook, scrolling on Instagram, whatever it is, always projecting outside, but we're not really paying attention to what is our internal experience. And when we are doing meditation practice or come to a monastery and have very little sensual pleasure going on, and then automatically you start becoming more in tune with your inner emotions, with your mind, with understanding how it works. So then as you study the Dhamma, then the Dhamma doesn't become an intellectual exercise anymore, but becomes something that is speaking to your experience. So that then when more things are happening, when you're more engaged in the world and there's someone shouting and there's this and there's a traffic light in the car and like the person shopping next to you, like a lot of different things happening at the same time, at least you are in touch with what's going on in your mind, and you can have an appropriate response, hopefully, or at least know that you're having an inappropriate response. That's also like better than being completely clueless and going like, whoa, what just happened? Which is normally
Yeah, at least you're having some wisdom and you know that there's something you can work on.
Yeah. And Pia says, are habits of mind synonyms the same as with asava, taints?
In some way, I guess. I kind of was using it a bit more loosely. So it could cover asavas. It could also cover like defilements, so kilesas. I think there are a few Pali words that sort of broadly cover the same topic. And depending on the sutta, they're classified in different categories. Sometimes they're called asavas, sometimes they're called defilements, kilesas, sometimes they use various other words. So personally, I'm just kind of using this, fairly unspecifically, the word habits of mind. It doesn't correspond to one specific Pali word.
Yeah. Also nusayas, so underlying tendencies.
Yes.
Those are the most difficult to, actually even be aware that they're there because they're underlying tendencies. But actually, yes, I think we're going to explore all these different nuances in the next month. We're trying to get different monastics to talk about it so we can explore that better, Pia. And Scott says, I'm a hate type 2. Hatred made me mentally ill. Yeah, actually, that's thanks for sharing that. It is a mental illness. I mean, according to Buddhism, we're all mentally ill. So it's just that we have certain, like, I guess, acceptance towards a relative like state of mental illness. And then, of course, if we don't really do anything about it and we keep on, it's a hit or miss, as we were saying earlier, then it can be, certain traits can become chronic. And I think that's when we need, that's when we use words like mental illness, I think, in Western context. That's when we need the help of a specialist to get us to a state where it's not chronic. Like there's the mental illness, but not the chronic mental illness, I would say. And then we can do more of a, like, the Dhamma can be very helpful. I mean, it obviously can also be helpful while we're doing, therapy. But it's good not to conflate the two or think that one is a replacement for the other, because sometimes they address different issues, tackle different parts. Do you have anything? Our resident Kyle here.
So in the honeyed tip with the poison root, I think the honeyed tip can often be a conceit of superiority. That's why it's fun to be angry at somebody. Do you think that that's the case? And, if so, is it possible to be angry at somebody without thinking that you're better than them?
I mean, personally, from experience, I've had both that perhaps, actually, I thought that the person was being very unskillful and kind of very much below me. But also the opposite, very angry about someone that perhaps I perceived as quote unquote superior to me. Angry at myself, angry at the situation, angry at them for not seeing that actually I had good qualities there. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily in relation to someone, but there are certain things. It's kind of like eating ice cream, or whatever you like. Chocolate. I don't like chocolate, but most people like chocolate. So there's a pleasant feeling to it. And whether there are people around that, appreciate, that make you feel bad that you're eating chocolate, or maybe that you feel better because they don't like chocolate and you're like, oh, you have no taste, or they eat a lower type of chocolate, there's still that pleasant sensation. And so I feel that there is something that is actually a raw feeling, but it's not complete. It's not complete. You're not experiencing fully the anger. You're only focusing on one particular element of the experience that is pleasant. No different than ice cream, actually, getting back to the metaphor. We tend to focus on the creaminess, on the softness, on the, whatever, vanilla flavor, but we don't focus on the iciness of the ice part of the cream, or the shivers, the part of the mouth that starts numbing. There's actually a lot of unpleasant feelings too. So we are very selective whenever we think this is a good experience or a bad experience or a neutral experience. In reality, we're having 1% of the experience and we label it as such and we continue believing it. So I feel like anger is the same, most of my life, I actually, prior to Buddhist practice, I just kept on developing it, really. I mean, I was also in a field in fashion where it's actually highly appreciated. So you are encouraged to develop it. But it never occurred to me that there was something harmful to it until I started reflecting on it, contemplating on it in part of practice. But maybe Venerable has a different.
Yeah, I think anger gives you a very strong rush of energy. And it's that energy that is really pleasant, because then you have, you can act on stuff and you feel powerful. And I think it doesn't necessarily come from a conceit of superiority. It can also come from the opposite, feeling very inferior, feeling very insecure, and then feeling a trigger comes and you feel like very, very threatened. And then you have this rush of anger that gives you like power and that gives you agency, and you think you're in control of the situation. So it could also come from the opposite, from feeling very inferior, I think. Yeah.
Good to see you online, Minnie. We hope that you're feeling better physically. Good to see you. Kyle also says hello. And Matt says, what do you advise when you recognize yourself getting angry in the same specific situation over and over, even as you realize as it's happening that it's unwholesome and it is still happening?
Take yourself out of the situation. When you see the situation is unfolding, either mentally take a step back, and if that is not enough, then take yourself out. Just leave the room for a while. Calm down somewhere, and when you feel you're strong enough, then come back. So if you see it's happening over and over and your mind isn't strong enough to deal with it, then, don't be in that situation for a while until you have developed enough that you can handle the situation. So there are suttas, for example, the Sabbasava Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 2, that Venerable mentioned earlier, where the Buddha says there are 7 categories of taints, and we deal with them in different ways. And one way to deal with them is by avoiding them. So if it's too much for you at that particular point, then just avoid the situation. We don't have to put ourselves through everything that happens. Sometimes the skillful, the wise thing to do is to just not be there until you're strong enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Another thing that is very helpful, if it's not an actual situation that is currently happening, but maybe it's just you and yourself and the, the story in your mind, and perhaps someone has done spreading bad rumors about you, etc., etc. There's actually this really beautiful sutta in Anguttara Nikaya. I can't remember where, but somewhere in the Anguttara Nikaya, which is actually hilarious because the the Buddha goes exactly through all the different scenarios that we go with our minds, like, oh, that person is going to spread bad rumors about me. Well, what can I do about it?
Yeah.
Or that person, is going to like get all my friends to hate me. Well, what can I do about it? Etc., etc. Like pretty much any of our fears, as the person before was asking, the relationship between anger and fear, we can get very angry because we're fear also of what's going to happen in the future. But we really have no control over that, and we have no control over other people's actions. So actually reflecting in that way is, what can I do about it? Well, I can't actually do anything. Or the other way is this beneficial for myself? Is this beneficial for the other person? And is this beneficial for myself and others? Not really. And actually, it's so much easier to drop it when we start contemplating in that way. At least I find it very, very useful. Hello, Abhishek from Australia. Good to see you. And Eva says, Namo Buddhaya, Bhikkhunis. In this modern world, many people are easily offended and easily withdraw from people, and sometimes judge people harshly based on their own perspective. So how to handle different opinions and judgments with awareness and upekkha?
Well, I think, this has always been the case that other people, try to judge people and treat them harshly and stuff. Even the Buddha was criticized by people. Even the Arahants of old were criticized by other people. So, and I remember a sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya where there is a king called King Pasenadi, and he comes to the Venerable Ananda and he asks Ananda if people criticize the Buddha at any point and if that is something of concern. And so Ananda says, well, the thing to reflect on is the person who is criticizing, is that a wise person or is it a stupid person? And if it's a wise person, then you should take it seriously and reflect on your behavior, and maybe you could change it, or maybe there's something valid that's helpful for you to show you a blind spot that you didn't see before. So you have good feedback and you put that to good use. But if the other person is stupid, then you shouldn't take this too hard, because it's just going to lead you in the wrong direction. So whatever you're going to do, people are going to criticize you anyway. If you talk a lot, people are criticizing you. If you don't talk, people are criticizing you. If you talk moderately much, people still criticize you. So whatever you do, people will always find fault with something, because you just can't please everybody, because people are different. So, reflect, is the other person a skillful person? Is it a silly person? And is what they're saying helpful, or is it not helpful? And if it's helpful, then take it. And if it's not helpful, then just let it go. So we really, we have the feeling that we have to please everybody, but that's really just putting a lot of pressure on ourselves, and that's just totally unrealistic. So when we practice Dhamma, we also have to see what is realistic and what is just totally our mental habits, our conditioning that is actually unskillful, and that we should see in our practice and then also let go. And I think this perfectionism and this trying to please everybody is really something that is very toxic, and that's not helpful for us at all. And to know that even the Buddha couldn't please everybody, so there's no point in us attempting to please everybody. And also our characters are different, we are all different, so we don't have to try and be someone else just because people want us to be someone else. And I think the more we become comfortable with ourselves and with our own minds, and the more we get to know ourselves, the more we can also not be provoked by other people, and just, stand in our own truth and be comfortable with be comfortable in our own skin without trying to impress other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yeah, so that's why it's very important to cultivate sila. become virtuous people, because then actually we have something good to recollect. The Buddha always encourages us to recollect our own goodness. And when we know that we're good people, then all this criticism, all this other stuff, we just understand that it is, someone's perspective, or their ideas or judgments, etc. And we don't need to get too involved, because we have a pure heart. And Sam says, is grief a form of anger of sudden loss and not able to accept reality of life? Well, I would say it's fundamentally ignorance of just not understanding things as they really are. So it's actually all greed, hatred, and delusion right there in essence. So there are parts, like as I was talking to another person a few weeks ago, like right now the fall is coming, and I would encourage you to ask yourself, do you like the fall? Usually people say yes, so I love the fall, it's so beautiful. Well, the fall is actually death right there. Like everything is dying. It's in the process of dying and decaying. Yet we actually don't feel grief. Why is it that we don't feel grief? It's because we understand it. Actually, there's dependent origination right there. We understand exactly everything. We're seeing closely what the process is. Hence, there is no suffering. But actually, we can see both. We have space, room for everything to be inside of ourselves. We're not clinging. We also don't may fall always be like this forever. May these leaves not decompose. Or may these leaves get back to life and get back on the things. Like we are fully there in the experience, understanding and taking it in. But also because, trees are not very close to us, So it's fundamentally the closer things are to us. And actually that is also true to sentient beings, to humans, to cats. We can experience the same with cats. If we see cats dying and coming to birth, getting sick, we understand. But then if we start becoming friends with a cat and the cat hangs out, then we're like, oh, may the cat always be like that forever? Oh, wait, now it's sick. He's sick. He shouldn't be sick. Maybe he's going to die. I wish he didn't die. And it's the same with our family. I haven't met Venerable's parents. So if they were to die tomorrow, I hope not. But I would have a different relationship to the news than if they told me that my parents had died, right? Yet we're still humans, we're still bhikkhunis, and they're still parents. Like, it's just really interesting how the more we're involved, we're there. And Mini says, Ayya Vimalanyani always speak relevant and valuable words based in Buddha's teachings. Okay, you speak less though. I would like to listen more from you.
See, this is exactly what I said. Some people say you speak too much. Other people say you speak too little.
Well, Mini, you can find all of her talks on our YouTube channel and more. Actually, she gave 4 talks last week, so you can listen to all of them and more. Actually, there was a whole series that is still actually being broadcasted and on the bhikkhunis from the past. So, and keep tuned because Venerable is sharing more and more teachings here at Empty Cloud. All right.
So I'm glad you're enjoying it, Mini. And there are plenty of teachings on that channel. But I think my personality is as it is, and it's probably not going to change into a very talkative person anytime soon. So thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate it. And I mean, Ayya Soma was also here, and I think she also taught a lot of really amazing things. I really enjoyed having this conversation tonight. So thank you very much for joining me, or for the two of us joining together tonight. Did you want to make any announcements?
Just that tomorrow morning we will have Sumita again, morning and evening. He will be finishing his series of talks on dependent origination, and then Friday as usual, 8 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. New York City time. We'll have Sutta study and then monk chat in the evening. Sutta study in the morning and then monk chat in the evening. And if you're around in New Jersey, on Saturday at 6 p.m. there will be meditation on the lawn as well as a talk, and on Sunday there will be in the afternoon an afternoon of mindfulness, so a bunch of meditation and practice to be done. All right, so we can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a good evening.